Yeah, no, there was a towel soaked in blood
Okay.
at the bottom of this seat, which is where she came out of.
This was the scene that led Tory Lanez to prison. 2 years into his sentence, he got stabbed over a dozen times and is currently on life support as both of his lungs were punctured during a heavy brawl. But here's where it gets crazy. An inmate just came forward and said Tory won't make it out alive. Who is behind Tory Lanez's stabbing? Why are death threats piling up? And what really goes down inside those prison walls? Let's get into it. The shocking prison stabbing. Tory Lanez got shanked 14 times on May 12, 2025 at the California Correctional. The incident popped off around 7:20 in the morning in the yard. What started as a regular day in the pen quickly turned into chaos when another inmate came at Lanez with what the COs called a homemade shank, prison talk for a makeshift knife. This wasn't just somebody trying to press Tory or put hands on him as a warning. Reports say that the op stabbed Lanez 14 separate times, hitting multiple spots on his body in what looks like a calculated hit, no mistakes. 7 of those jabs were to his back, 4 to his torso, 2 to the back of his dome, and 1 to the left side of his grill. The most serious part of the whole situation is that both of Lanez's lungs collapsed from the stabbing. And for those who don't know, having both lungs give out at the same time is the type of medical emergency that could be deadly ASAP. Luckily, the COs moved quick, calling on emergency protocols and getting paramedics on the scene. He was given first aid right there in the yard before he got rushed by ambulance to a hospital in Kern County. At first, his injuries didn't seem too severe, but as more details rolled out, everyone saw just how close he came to taking his last breath. Apparently, it was so severe he had to be placed on a breathing machine because of his collapsed lungs. Now, while the immediate danger seems to have passed with reports saying Lanez is now breathing on his own and in good spirits, this attack raises some real questions about what was behind the whole violence and what it means for his future behind the wall. The California Correctional Institution in Tehachapi, where Lanez is locked down, is a medium security facility housing thousands of inmates. Like a lot of prisons, it's got its own share of violence and gang politics. For a big name like Lanez, trust me when I say the risks are way higher. So was this a random prison brawl? Was it related to yard politics or gang beef? Or could it be connected to his high-profile case? Well, let's find out. What makes this whole situation even more sus is that this attack happened just 4 months after Lanez got slapped hard with a 5-year restraining order filed by Megan Thee Stallion, the very female he was convicted of shooting. The attack and its timing have really got people believing there are possible connections, though there's no exact evidence backing these conspiracy theories. Now, to really understand how deep this situation is, we need to take a look at everything that led to him getting locked up in the first place. Believe me, this story is way more complex than just a prison yard stabbing. Lanez, whose birth name is Daystar Peterson, is currently serving a 10-year bid for shooting fellow hip-hop artist Megan Thee Stallion in the feet after a function in the Hollywood Hills. The shooting, which took place on July 12, 2020, has a lot of controversies and split opinions tied to it. One of these is that the whole thing could have been a setup against Lanez.
There's some blood up here.
Yeah, no, there was a towel soaked in blood
Okay.
at the bottom of this seat, which is where she came out of.
After a trial that kept everyone glued to their screens, Lanez was found guilty on December 23, 2022 on multiple charges, including assault with a semi-automatic firearm, carrying a loaded unregistered firearm in a vehicle, and discharging a firearm with gross negligence. This came right after Megan Thee Stallion, whose real name is Megan Pete, took the stand and testified about getting shot by Lanez and how it messed her up both physically and mentally. During the trial, the court heard how Lanez had let off shots at Megan's feet after they got into the car, causing injuries that required her getting a really painful foot surgery. On August 8, 2023, Lanez got handed his sentence, 10 years in the state pen by Judge David Hereford in LA County Superior Court. Even though his legal team tried to get him out on bail with an appeal, the motion got denied about a month after the sentence, with the judge pointing out the violent nature of his conviction, his past issues with court orders, and the risk that he might get deported since he's not even a U.S. citizen. Throughout this whole process, and even after getting locked up, Lanez has maintained that he's innocent, a stance that makes a lot of people believe it was all a setup. Unfortunately, the court wasn't buying it. Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon even commented on the whole case, flipping it to broader conversations about violence against women, especially in the entertainment industry.
The fact that Ms. Pete is a successful entertainer has brought a spotlight on the important issue of violence against women. There are many people in our community that endure acts of violence every day from people close to them and feel reluctant to come forward when this happens.
Now, less than 2 years into his dime piece, Lanez is facing a new struggle, trying to survive in a sick prison where he's already been marked. Now everyone's asking questions about his safety in his cell and what actions might be needed to protect him at least till he's out after 8 more years. At the moment, prison officials and investigators are asking themselves the big question. Should they transfer Lanez to a different facility? Should they put him in protective custody? Or should they try a brute force type of investigation to find the assassin? For Lanez himself, the road to recovery is going to be long and really rough. While reports say he's stable and getting better, the physical and mental trauma from getting stabbed 14 times is no joke. Even if he's moved to another prison, what is the tendency that an event like this would not repeat itself? Is he really marked for death? The legal saga and restraining order. All right, let's start by properly explaining the whole deal between Megan Thee Stallion and Tory Lanez, including the recent restraining order that added another layer to the drama.
There was an argument in the car?
It was an argument because I was ready to go and everybody else wasn't ready to go.
The beef between Tory Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion started just as a single night of violence that slowly included multiple court visits, public statements, social media chaos, and now, most recently, a 5-year restraining order that got approved just months before this prison stabbing popped off. Let's rewind and look at the full timeline of events that brought us here. After the July 2020 shooting, Tory Lanez was initially hit with charges in October 2020 for felony assault with a semi-automatic firearm, personal use of a firearm, and carrying a loaded unregistered firearm in a vehicle. These charges came from the incident where he shot Megan Thee Stallion in both feet after they got into it following a party at Kylie Jenner's crib in the Hollywood Hills. The case took over 2 years to make it to trial, during which time both Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion were blowing the sirens on their career, though Megan had spoken openly about the trauma and how the shooting turned her whole life upside down. The trial itself, which kicked off in December 2022, had everyone watching and choosing sides, especially in the hip-hop community. Evidence at the trial included Megan's own testimony, where she broke down exactly what happened that night and how deep it touched her. The jury also heard from other witnesses who were there during the incident, including Kelsey Harris, Megan's former homegirl who was in the whip when the shots were fired. After a long time pointing fingers, the jury dropped their verdict on December 23, 2022, finding Lanez guilty on all charges. The conviction included assault with a semi-automatic firearm, carrying a loaded unregistered firearm in a vehicle, and discharging a firearm with gross negligence. This verdict was a major win for Megan, confirming her story and shutting down Lanez's claims that he didn't do it. After the conviction, there was a gap of several months before sentencing, during which Lanez's legal team was cooking up arguments to try and get him a lighter sentence. But on August 8, 2023, Judge David Hereford sentenced Lanez to 10 years in prison with no chance of parole, a heavy sentence for a really heavy crime. Lanez's lawyers then filed for bail while they appealed, but that was denied on September 14, 2023. As a result, Lanez started serving his bid right away at the California Correctional Institution in Tehachapi, where he would later catch that serious fade we've been talking about. Believe me though, it didn't end there. In another twist to the saga, Megan filed for a restraining order against Lanez on December 17, 2024, nearly a year and a half after he started serving his sentence. The reason for this restraining order was actually really wild. Megan claimed that Lanez had been harassing her from prison through third parties and social media, continuing to mess with her head despite being behind bars. We don't exactly know how that's possible, but according to court documents filed to support the restraining order, Megan said that Lanez had been traumatizing her since the 2020 incident and showed no signs of falling back, even paying bloggers and other people to spread lies about her. The petition for the restraining order drew up a really disturbing picture of the case, suggesting that Lanez's power extended well beyond the prison walls. Despite being locked up, it seemed a lot like he was still able to control Megan's life, sort of like firing another bullet at her, but this time from prison to her home in Houston. A hearing on the restraining order took place in early January 2025, during which Megan testified via video about what she'd been going through, including statements like, "I haven't been at peace since I've been shot, and I'm just trying to be unharassed, not only by the person who shot me, but by the people he's been paying to continue to harass me." Perhaps the most heart-touching was when she said, "I feel like maybe he'll shoot me again, and maybe this time I won't make it," a clear sign that she wasn't healing from the trauma anytime soon. After looking at all the evidence and testimony, Judge Richard Bloom granted the restraining order on January 9, 2025, affecting it until January 9, 2030, a full 5 years of protection. This restraining order was also a replacement of a previous criminal protective order that had expired after Lanez's conviction, a little bit of a showdown that the drama was still ongoing. The terms of the restraining order were real simple. It prohibited Lanez from contacting Megan directly or indirectly, including through third parties or social media. It also requires him to stay a significant distance from her home, and her workplace. place. Believe me, if I doubt Lanez will be troubled by this restraining order, especially since he's going to be in prison for those 5 years. What's particularly wild about this restraining order, though, is that it was granted despite Lanez being in prison, suggesting that the court recognized his ability to still pull a few strings with his gang outside the prison walls. I guess all celebrities have their own whip of pals, just in case they never get restricted like in a prison. Now, the timing of the restraining order in relation to the recent prison stabbing is a little bit on the nose. The order was granted on January 9th, 2025, just 4 months before the May 12th attack. While there's no evidence suggesting a direct connection between these events, the small time lapse has got people talking, especially questioning the ongoing tension between Lanez and Megan and the violence that occurred in the prison yard. Let's just keep in mind that such speculation remains just that, speculation. The motive for the prison attack remains unclear, with investigations ongoing. Prison violence can happen for a million different reasons, many of which might have nothing to do with an inmate's public profile or legal issues outside the prison. Gang involvement, personal beef, prison politics, or random acts of violence could all lead to this kind of event. Still, the restraining order and legal saga does give us something to question, at least in relation to the stabbing. Frankly, you don't expect a 5-year beef this serious to just end with some court drama and legal papers. Someone has to take the fall. A tit for tat, you might call it. For Megan, the restraining order is just one necessary step to being a bit more safe and keeping a clear peace of mind. For Lanez, he'll just be thanking his stars he got lucky with collapsed lungs. It could have been much worse. His conviction and imprisonment just make the most dramatic fall from grace for an artist who once enjoyed rocking concerts like they were his birthright. Now, with only 2 years off his 10-year sentence, and with the recent violent attack that almost handed him a death sentence, his future in the music industry is looking mad uncertain. The legal saga between these two artists has called for discussions about violence against women, particularly in the entertainment industry. As Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gaskin noted in his statement on the case, Megan's status as a successful entertainer brought important attention to these issues, encouraging others to come forward with their own experiences of violence and abuse, just like in the case of music mogul Sean Diddy Combs. At the same time, the Megan Lanez case has exposed some dark sides to celebrity culture and social media, where public figures can become targets of harassment, cap, and toxic fan behavior. The belief that Lanez actually still orchestrates harassment campaigns against Megan even from prison goes a little too far in explaining just how powerful a lot of these stars are, even when they are handcuffed and closed off. Tory Lanez's uncertain future. So far, we've talked about the shocking attack that left Lanez paralyzed with 14 stab wounds and collapsed lungs, as well as the whole legal case between Lanez and Megan Thee Stallion that resulted in his 10-year bid and a subsequent 5-year restraining order. Now let's talk about what this recent violence might mean for Lanez. Would he still be back into the music industry? The May 12th, 2025 stabbing at California Correctional Institution has completely flipped the script on Lanez's incarceration and probably on his future. What was already a tough 10-year bid with a little silver lining has now become a potentially all-black situation, bringing up some questions about whether he can safely serve the rest of his time at this facility or any standard prison environment. Let's first look at the immediate aftermath of the attack. According to reports, Lanez is currently getting stitched up from his injuries in a hospital in Kern County. While his condition has now stabilized, the road to full recovery will be as challenging as learning how to walk anew. The collapse of both lungs is a serious medical emergency that requires he undergo a good long time of treatment and rehabilitation, and the brain picture of getting slashed like dead meat is something that will stay hawked in your head for a while. Once medically cleared to leave the hospital, Lanez will face an uncertain return to the prison system. The California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, CDCR, has to make tough decisions regarding his placement. With such a serious security incident on their tabs, several options might pop onto the table. First, Lanez could get sent back to the same facility but placed in ADSEG or PC, basically isolated from Gen Pop to avoid another murder attempt. While this sounds like a good option, as it would provide him with physical protection, it does come with some really sick downsides, including limited access to programs, rec time, and human contact. Truth be told, spending a long time in such restricted places has really messed with inmates' heads, and definitely not in a good way. Another option would be to have Lanez transferred to a different facility within the California prison system, maybe one with much better security or specialized units for high-profile inmates. This would offer a fresh start away from the murder threats at Tehachapi, but wouldn't necessarily solve the underlying issues that come with his celebrity celebrity status and controversial case. In other words, he could also be stabbed here and no one would care. A third possibility, though less common and less used, would be to have him transferred to a federal facility through an interstate compact agreement. This is usually done for inmates who face specific safety issues within their state's prison system. However, giving Lanez this option would depend on a long list of administrative factors and paperwork agreements between correctional departments. Regardless of where Lanez serves the remainder of his sentence, the stabbing incident has highlighted the significant safety challenges he faces as a high-profile inmate. Celebrities in prison often deal with unique risks. They may become targets for other inmates seeking stripes, subjected to extortion attempts, or get caught up in the complex politics of prison gangs and power structures. For someone like Lanez, whose case has been highly publicized and divisive, these risks are particularly serious. The ongoing investigation into the stabbing may provide crucial insights into the specific threats facing Lanez. As noted earlier, the prison's investigative unit and the Kern County District Attorney's Office are working to determine the motive behind the attack and identify all individuals involved. The findings of this investigation will likely influence decisions about Lanez's future placement and security needs. If the attack is found to be related to prison gang activity, for instance, this might necessitate specific protective measures tailored to that threat. If it was a random act of violence or motivated by personal beef, different approaches might be warranted. Understanding the root cause is essential for preventing future incidents. We've got to note that violence in prisons isn't uncommon. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, physical altercations occur with concerning frequency in correctional facilities across the United States. However, attacks of the severity seen in Lanez's case, 14 stab wounds resulting in collapsed lungs, represent the extreme end of the spectrum. Such potentially lethal violence indicates a significant security failure that prison administrators will need to address. The timing of this attack, coming just 4 months after the January 2025 restraining order granted to Megan Thee Stallion, adds another layer of complexity to the situation. While there's no evidence directly connecting these events, the proximity has fueled speculation about possible relationships between Lanez's ongoing legal troubles and the violence he experienced. Some observers have wondered whether the restraining order and its allegations about Lanez orchestrating harassment from prison might have affected his standing among other inmates or created new tensions within the facility. Others have speculated about possible connections to supporters or ops of either Lanez or Megan Thee Stallion. However, we should note that such theories remain speculative, and prison violence often stems from internal issues that have very little to do with how famous an inmate is. Looking beyond the immediate security concerns, the stabbing also raises questions about Lanez's future more broadly. Having served less than 2 years of his 10-year sentence, he faces a long road ahead in the correctional system. The physical and psychological impacts of this attack will undoubtedly affect his experience of incarceration, potentially making an already difficult situation even more challenging. There are also potential legal implications to consider. Depending on the findings of the investigation, new criminal charges could be filed against the perpetrator of the stabbing, leading to additional court proceedings in which Lanez would likely be called to testify. Such a process could further complicate his situation and potentially expose him to additional risks. From a medical perspective, the long-term effects of Lanez's injuries may necessitate ongoing treatment and monitoring. Collapsed lungs can lead to various complications, including reduced lung function, chronic pain, and increased susceptibility to respiratory infections. Ensuring adequate medical care within the prison system will be an important consideration for authorities responsible for his custody. Beyond these practical concerns, the stabbing incident serves as a stark reminder of the fundamental challenges and dangers inherent in the prison system, particularly for those whose cases have attracted significant public attention. The balance between punishment, rehabilitation, and basic safety is a complex one, and incidents like this highlight the difficulties in maintaining that balance effectively. For Megan Thee Stallion, news of the attack on Lanez likely brings mixed emotions. While she has expressed fear of him in her testimony for the restraining order, even saying, "I feel like maybe he'll shoot me again, and maybe this time I won't make it." Violence against anyone, even someone who has caused harm, raises complex ethical and emotional questions. The ongoing saga between these two artists continues to evolve in ways that few could have predicted. The public and media response to the stabbing has been similarly complex. Some have expressed concern and sympathy for Lanez, regardless of their views on his conviction. Others have pointed to the incident as evidence of deeper problems within the prison system. Still others have connected it to broader conversations about violence, celebrity culture, and the consequences of criminal behavior. These diverse perspectives reflect the multifaceted multifaceted nature of the case and its importance in contemporary cultural discussions. As we continue to follow this story, several key questions remain unanswered. Will the investigation reveal a clear motive for the attack? What measures will be taken to ensure Lanez's safety moving forward? How will this incident affect his experience of incarceration and potentially his eventual return to society? And what lessons can be drawn about the prison system, violence, and the complex interplay between celebrity status and criminal justice, particularly in California? What is clear is that the stabbing represents a significant turning point in Lanez's incarceration, a moment that transforms what was already a challenging sentence into something potentially much more dangerous. For someone facing 8 more years behind bars, the implications of this attack extend far beyond the immediate medical consequences, touching on fundamental questions of safety, security, and survival in one of society's most difficult environments. The California Correctional Institution in Tehachapi, like many prisons across the country, faces the ongoing challenge of balancing multiple priorities, punishing criminal behavior, providing opportunities for rehabilitation, and maintaining basic safety for all individuals within its walls. High-profile cases like Lanez's highlight the complexity of this balancing act and the potential consequences when it fails. For Tory Lanez personally, the road ahead is uncertain at best. Having survived a potentially fatal attack just months into his sentence, he now faces the prospect of years more incarceration with the knowledge that similar dangers may lurk. How he navigates this reality and how the correctional system responds to the security failures it represents will shape not only his individual experience but potentially broader discussions about prison safety and the treatment of high-profile inmates. As this story continues to develop, we'll be following the investigation, any changes to Lanez's custody situation, and the broader implications for all involved. What began as a shocking incident of violence has revealed deeper issues about celebrity, justice, safety, and the complex human stories behind the headlines. And with that, we've sealed the deal with today's video. If you found this interesting, hit that like button. Subscribe and check out our other videos dropping crazy facts on similar topics. Stay woke, fam.